What's up, future shredlords? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. I apologize about Thursday. Essentially, there's a big construction project going on, so the power was going on intermittently. By the time it came back on, the day was basically shot. And I was like, shut her down, time for a nap. Good times had by all. Well, I had a good time. So here we are, Sunday. We're going to talk about developing feeling on the instrument, the guitar in this case. That's obviously a very complex question, but it can be broken up into several sections. Obviously, there's the supervisory skills. We got to talk about that first, the cerebral stuff, the fluency of systems. You're not going to be very good at working on feeling when you don't actually know what or where to play. Right? Then you have synergy. So the systems that you are using, those two things go together. If you just start using like diminished scales and then major triads, well, you know, in certain instances, that's not going to work out so well. In other instances, it'll work great. And of course, you start developing the guitar wisdom to be like, know when to use when or when to avoid this particular situation. But I think you understand my point here. The synergy part is happening all the time between just two elements, and then when you start ganging those elements together to make bigger phrases, those phrases have to synergize with the next phrase or the preceding phrase. You see what I mean? It's always at work. It's like gravity. It affects everything. So the synergy thing has to happen with respect to the system fluency. So you put the two systems together. Then you have interoperability. The systems have to synergize as far as the techniques are concerned. And you have to practice so that you can actually play them. Just because it's awkward doesn't mean it can't be done. The question is can you do it fluently? And so get it done, right? So that's the interoperability part. And of course, then you have fluidity of ideas, being able to chain these little sort of music fragments together. Now listen, sometimes they come out as being like very complex, like a series of arpeggios or something. But other times it's like in the intro solo where it's just very straightforward. And that's the point, which gets into the physicality part of it, right? A lot of these cerebral operations and stuff like that are meaningless if you can't actually execute physically on the fretboard, right? So this is where, again, melody starts to really create a focus on making sure that the physical requirements are definitely up to par. So the slides have to be there with confidence, right? The vibrato has to be there. Are you using, like a Steve Vai sort of oscillating vibrato up and down? Are you using like a Zakk Wylde aggressive vibrato? Are you doing the classical type? Are you doing the more bluesy one? Sort of a B.B. King idea? What? That's just it. There's about 5 or 6 different techniques there. How many of them can you actually play? Or did you even bother to categorize them? And so this all gets to the idea of playing with feeling and creating melody. Because at a particular time, you'll be like, oh, I should use this vibrato here, right? And, oh, when I'm doing it here, though, I should use this one. And it's like, again, it's like a paintbrush that you're using to paint a picture. And having access to different paintbrushes lets you do sort of more detailed and or give you an opportunity to create a better representation of what it is that you're seeing in your mind. Right? You're like, oh, I should do that there because it'll contrast nicely with what I was doing before. Again, all of these supervisory skills are sort of like controlling the physicality aspect, but then you have to have enough confidence in the physical aspect to be able to affect the actual, be able to actually carry out these supervisory actions. Be like, okay, take these 2 scale forms or this arpeggio and do this. Right, when it comes to playing the techniques, when it comes to playing the shapes. So it's those 2 elements married up together that creates your guitar DNA. And of course, you can hear when people go to the music store, you're like, there's some Van Halen there. Oh, a little bit of Jimmy Page. Oh, there's some Billy Gibbons, whatever it is, right? You can hear when people basically play in the style of these famous guitar players because they've absorbed the guitar DNA. They haven't decoded it yet. They've absorbed it, but all they can do is create like a clone, a carbon copy. Our mission is just to basically decode it and then improve upon it. Be like, okay, the master is spoken, and you absorb this information, you break it down, and then you do something with it, which is what we're going to work on Tuesday. These Gambale arpeggios just elevated to the next level. It's just killer exercise to break down the fretboard. Absolutely savage. But the big takeaway, of course, is that I would have never have gotten there that far to sort of combine these two elements together if I didn't actually sort of sat there and thought about melody, because I was like, when I play these arpeggios, they don't sound very melodic. You know what I mean? I can't actually factor these into solos and stuff. And then I started to look at new ways of combining them together, and then that's when everything fell into place. And it had created a much more sort of efficient sort of soloing tool, if you will. Right? Now, listen, that's a much more advanced technique that we're going to see on Tuesday. But the point being here is that all of the stuff with respect to melody and playing slowly and minimizing stuff and sort of creating self-contained musical statements that I can then sort of gang together one after another, like a train just taking on another car and another car and another car. Just keep attaching them on there as the train keeps moving until it's done. And then that's it. That's the end of that musical journey. Yeah, that's the end of the song, or it's the end of the part, or whatever it is. Done. Right? But that's the mindset itself. Is the melody part is the counterbalance to the shred. And so when you exhibit more minimalist behavior and just play as few notes as necessary to create some sort of emotional musical content, that's a skill you have to practice. It's not something that just they grant you, right? You have to use all of the technical knowledge that you've been working on to get faster, to get more confident on the instrument, slow down, and now start to chain them together in small musical sentences and come up with the kind of idea that you heard me do in the intro solo, where it's not about, doing anything too shreddy. Eventually, of course, you're going to do an amalgamation of both of these ideas in whatever sort of proportions you feel is necessary. That's basically the John Petrucci approach. But the first step has to be that you just strip away the security blanket of playing fast or doing a canned lick. And instead you start to think, okay, well, what would I play? Which gets me to the last point of this video, which is you have to be the person that manifests the melody. It doesn't just materialize from the ether. You have to actually think it up and be like, oh, I should do this. You listen to the chord that's being played in the backing track, and you're like, oh, that's definitely diminished. And in your mind, you're like, it would sound really cool if I played this harmonic minor scale from the Phrygian position. Just because in your head, you're like, that is what I'm seeing right now. I know what that sounds like, and now I'm seeing that superimposed. And you start playing it. You're like, okay, now I need to synergize. I'm going to use a cadence or something. So you can come out of the harmonic minor and jump back into the major scale. And so all of the supervisory skills are firing at once. And then, of course, it's the idea that you can just move to the position and then execute the scale. And last but not least, of course, is you could take just the scale positions themselves, or the scale and arpeggio, whatever you ended up doing, and just using that as a template to then play the choicest notes to capture the essence of the scale without actually having it sound like a scale and create a melody. That's like Zen master level. Okay, there's playing the scale. Then there's listening to the music and being like, I should play this scale with no help, right? Not because somebody else did it or you're playing along another solo. You're listening to music. You're like, oh, I recognize that chord. Play this scale. Boom. That's level 2. Level 3 is just take the notes of that scale and convert them into a melody. And then, of course, level 4 would be to just then transcend that melody across all of the various systems. So you could keep it as a motif. If you've ever watched movies, you'll notice they have the same kind of motifs going on all the time, but they play them in different keys with different types of flavors, like major when it's triumphant, of course, and then minor or very dissonant in other instances when things are going very bad for the heroes. So that's an incredibly important distinction right there. And that's essentially what you're trying to develop, is this idea that you can come up with this killer melody and then rap sort of around it the essence of whatever it is that you want that melody to sort of convey, whether it's happy or sad or mysterious or depressed or whatever it is. And that's a skill. That's a very, very challenging skill to acquire. And that's just it right there, is just once you start chasing melody, essentially you don't stop. The ideas just get more complicated. And that's just it. You have to find new and more sort of, interesting ways of creating the melody, because the old ones just don't work anymore. They don't have the same magic, and you want to capture the magic again. And that's a good thing. It just keeps you on the hunt for looking for new ways to create music. But that's the video right there, is essentially you have the supervisory skills like synergy, fluency of systems, like fluidity of ideas, like interoperability. Those all basically affect every practice session. And you're trying to organize the information to be like, they follow these basic rules. These two systems, I can play and move between them with ease. They complement each other, right? And they basically complement each other in a way now, the way I'm playing them, so that the technique flows together. So I'm doing an arpeggio and a scale together kind of situation. And so when you organize your practice session, you start doing that, you're good to go. And of course, the other side is working on the melody aspects, where you're going to take those notes now as a collection and just choose the choicest ones and create with the help of a backing track. And if you don't need a backing track, you can either create your own by just playing a chord, or just with no chord. It can just be implied. Absolutely. So there is no borders here. But I would do it with music, obviously, so you can just stay on the path, and just do it with a vamp, where it's just one chord played all the time. Okay, it's called a vamp. So just go with B minor 7, and then you can do like a Phrygian type idea, and then you can do a Dorian type idea, and then you can do an Aeolian type idea, and be like, how do I get the Phrygian flavor? There's certain notes of that scale that'll give me the Phrygian flavor. How do I put them together in a sequence that will basically make it sound Phrygian? That's the exercise. That's what you have to figure out. It's like when these guys figured out math problems from 200 years ago. They just sit around after work and be like, I think I'll do some math. Same diff. When you're practicing, you're like, I need to come up with a new practice exercise. Well, there it is. There is your practice exercise. And there's many, many more. And here's the thing. When you do that, you start to reveal the layers of music and how all of this stuff is interrelated. I was talking to someone yesterday where I was like, there's this deep relationship between the minor 7, dominant 7, and minor 7, flat 5, all in the Dorian position. So you can use that information now, those 3 chords, they share a deep relationship in this one position. So that must mean they share a deep relationship in in every other position too. It's just how you order them. And then you can start to replicate that across the entire fretboard and have this incredibly useful exercise where you're using 3 sets of sounds played in conjunction with each other. And of course, as you're mapping out the fretboard, simultaneously now you can understand how to create a melody using each one of these flavors. Start off with the minor 7, move down to like the dominant 7, and then end with diminished. By ending on this one note that is basically giving you the implied flavor of diminished. That is how you develop feeling. Of course, the technical aspects with confidence playing, with bends, slides, vibrato, the whole 9 yards, rakes. Connecting the ideas together and moving between the systems and changing them up, obviously. I just do it in one because I wanted to keep it simple. But normally, you know, I would use arpeggios and other scale systems and stuff like that. So that's what you have to be shooting for too. But to start off with, initially, just really try to concentrate on using the least amount of notes and instead really focus in on creating a memorable melody, just like you've heard in thousands of songs. Try to write something like that for yourself. That's it for the video. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you on Tuesday.